And we should be live as soon as the thing finishes. So, Sam, take a crack.
Hi, I'm Sam from the UK editor, Freedom News. And this evening, we're going to be talking about Valencia, what's happening in Valencia. We're going to discuss the Ocalan news. And also kind of continue talking about what's going on in the States with the newly elected, second time elected President Trump. We're also possibly going to talk a bit about Starmer at COP29 and some other UK news. Sonia, do you want to introduce yourself?
Yeah, hi. This is Sonia, and I will start, with the item from Valencia. We had a little short news, just following up the situation there, and what we wanted to share from Freedom is that the fact that a lot of mutual aid groups started right away after the disaster stroke, and it's two main things happening right now, and it's the everlasting parliamentary fight that they are having, that who has the blame, the political blame in this case, if it's the Valencian government or the central government. And it's almost this false parliamentary fights they have between the left and the right in Spain. Perhaps some of the viewers know already. But the fact is that actually people have been manifesting that they want the president of the Valencian government, that is Masson, to just step off. As a president, but again, from anarchist perspective, the most interesting part is again the mutual aid that people have been being in the streets, helping each other regardless of their citizenship, and even stating both in media and social media as well, saying that just the people can help the people. So we are seeing, thankfully, that people are organizing themselves as it is. So these are the news from Valencia.
I'm kind of interested. So the ways in which mutual aid are manifesting, is there a vocal, active anarchist presence, or is it all sort of, just a kind of a thing that people are doing? I mean, which is also great, but obviously.
Yes, if it's more spontaneous or more organized from anarchists, like politicized, you're thinking. It seems like it's a mix of all of it. It's both in neighborhoods that have been organizing, but also some of the anarcho-syndicalist unions have been also stepping in, like CNT, CGT, and other anarchist groups that are already in the area. And otherwise, even some leftist groups, not necessarily political parties, but also other leftist groups that are kind of self-organized, have been stepping in. I mean, I'm not there physically, so I cannot say it for sure, but from the outside, it seems that they are just responding to the emergency, not necessarily that they are collaborating very closely or in a very organized matter. They don't, but they are all doing their piece of wonderful mutual aid, close to the people. So I think it might be a mixture, and I've seen a lot of spontaneous. Actually, the first day after the storm, we could see in media very spontaneous activation of people, gathering tools and going ahead and helping out. So that was most spontaneous. But afterwards, we have seen much more of a more organized kind of gathering materials, food, clothes, helping people to those who there's a lot of them. I think the last statistic says that almost 800,000 have been evacuated from their places, and it's going to take a while until people can recuperate, if they can recuperate part of their their places and homes. So that's how it stands by now.
Speaking of, Oh, sorry.
I was gonna say, and on the sort of the political kind of fallout, how much, sort of is the anger that sort of we're sort of seeing from the people, is that also sort of fairly spontaneous, or is that like kind of being, is there a kind of element of kind of that being kind of led by any political entity, or is that just sort of the people legitimately coming forward to express their anger?
And here comes the dangerous part of being the context that it is. Valencia, the last years have had a very strong conservative and far-right enclave, as some of you might know. So we see that the mobilization, especially what we named throwing mud against the king, the queen, and the presidents, this was most probably very spontaneous because people are angry with all the reasons to be angry about. But other measures, asking for the dimission of Mazón and other legal measures that have been taken, for instance, as we mentioned in the news from the CGT, they are much more organized. But it seems that it's the several fronts, and depending on the political position that these groups have, they are taking several steps ahead. Somebody are trying to fight for to secure the rights of workers, because as we explained in the first new we got out for a couple of weeks, the reason behind so many deaths in this case was both the political denial of that it was coming a storm. Remember that Mazón, the president, is a climate denier. I mean, he thought that this was just going to be 2 drops of rain, according to him, and he was having lunch while all of this was happening. That's why people are so angry. But the second main reason that behind all these deaths, and now it's over 200 people that are dead and many more are disappeared, we haven't found them yet. The other reason was all these oligarchs in many big companies and corporations that denied people to leave while the storm was on its full strength. So that's something we have to think about. So that's why some of, at least the CGT, the Anarcho-Syndicalist Union, they now demanded that the Valencian government secures, but now, 200 people and more are lost already. But this was because it was compulsory for them. They had to stay at work regardless of what was going on with the weather. So that's something to think about when it comes to other topics we will go through afterwards, when it comes to introducing much more AI into the workforce, and how is workers mainly are going to be pushed into death when all these climate changes comes along, because now it's in Spain, but last year was in Italy, and this will keep happening at a much higher degree. And the question is, from an anarchist perspective, how are we going then to perhaps go back to our historical tools of sabotage, of denying, to be at work producing, because otherwise, we can guarantee that a lot of people are going to die.
So one of the things that I did see, or actually it was passed on to me by a comrade, was that the government is not only being pretty useless in terms of its initial response, but also is attempting to blame Catalan separatists for what's going on at the moment and all the kind of anger in the local population, which it's a bit of a jump, I would have thought.
It's a bit of a jump, but this is because they have been in Spain, and I'm not going now to give a history lesson, but the so-called democratic change we had after Franco, it wasn't really that democratic. So actually they are still having this power struggle between the conservatives, the independentists in Catalonia and the Basque Country, and of course the central government, that right now somebody might say are the socialists, because of course that's a party that is there. You could argue how socialist they are, of course, but the thing is that right now, what's happening is that Mazón, that is in the Conservative Party, Partido Popular, he's being left very much alone by its own party, because they are just thinking about regaining the central power in Madrid. So they are not pushing him out. That should be the both respectful to the death and all the families that were touched by this, but also the fact that people are asking him to step out as a president, and he really doesn't care. He's not giving any sign that he's going to do anything. So yes, I think you're right that nobody wants to take responsibility for what happened. Neither the Valencian government nor the central government in Spain. So the solution from the Conservative Party is saying that, again, the central government should take over about the reparations and all the build-up afterwards. But nobody really is doing anything, at least at this point.
Cool. Thank you very much for that update. That was really interesting. So I think we can move on from there to. So we've got Ocalan making his first contact in quite a while, and what that potentially means for Kurdish autonomy and the fairly hairy situation in Kurdistan or Syria and Iraq.
Yeah, I mean, this is kind of an important and interesting moment. Ocalan being the kind of key theorist behind the ideas that many sort of kind of Kurds sort of follow to an extent. The sort of the situation and sort of history of the ideology is as with most things, is a bit kind of complex, but ultimately the PKK sort of started off as a Marxist-Leninist organization, and then after his arrest, Ocalan started reading the works of Murray Bookchin and sort of started incorporating increasing amounts of that into his own sort of theories. This is a very simplified version, but eventually kind of moved officially moved the PKK over to sort of something that could be kind of more accurately described as a sort of libertarian socialist, libertarian communist sort of type movement. Those ideas were then picked up by the Kurds in Syria, who upon sort of participating in the Rojava revolution implemented these ideas across large parts of northern Syria, where we over the last 10 years have seen some very impressive stuff. But, there's always a debate about sort of the extent, for anarchists, to what extent it is anarchist or anarchist adjacent, or sort of that. But I mean, I think it's fairly accurate to sort of call it libertarian socialist, libertarian communist in nature. But as part of Ocalan's arrest, when was that? The 90s, was it?
A while ago.
But he's been imprisoned for a very long time, and kind of most of that has been, as I understand it, largely in isolation. He's been allowed very limited contact with anybody, and most of his work that sort of got out had to be it had to be sort of smuggled out and stuff. This is an interesting one. Like he's a very interesting figure. I'm in no means an expert, and I'd be a bit reluctant to sort of say too much about him for fear of getting it wrong. But I think it's safe to say that he's a key figure in sort of this sort of century's kind of libertarian politics, and so and the situation, as you said, in sort of what sort of some people might call Kurdistan, is it is a complicated situation. Like the oppression the Kurds face from sort of the Syrian government, the Turkish government, the Iranian government, the Iraq government, and all that is very that's a very real oppression, and sort of likewise.
I feel like it's going to be a difficult one, in as much as his pitch essentially seems to be I have the moral authority to negotiate a peace deal of some kind. But obviously, the problem is not really with the Kurds in that sense. Erdogan has been nothing but aggressively expansionist in terms of, um, pitching the existence of an autonomous Kurdish zone as in itself being a threat to Turkish stability. Um, it's difficult to see, in a similar way as when people say, why doesn't Zelensky negotiate a peace with Putin? It's like, well, because Putin doesn't want peace yet. I feel that Ocalan is likely to be in a similar position, even if he was given that role. You see what I mean?
Pretty much. It's the situation is so kind of complicated. It's very difficult to sort of, I think, to sort of, kind of really sort of say how, this is kind of going to go. Like, it's nice to have sort of optimism there, but like, sort of Erdogan, his politics are, it's that sort of, authoritarians need, need that kind of other. And for Turkish authoritarians, the Kurds offer, the perfect other. So, you know, yeah, I'd agree with that. I find it very difficult to sort of see, peace being kind of in their interests.
Yeah, and I mean, pressure from elsewhere seems fairly vanishingly unlikely, I think. Which brings us on very neatly to the next piece. There you go. I can do links. This is the so you have an article up which is you can actually see the far right international taking shape, and this was based on on an article which showed up in our most recent journal, Their Internationalism and Ours, available at all good anarchist websites. Probably, I don't know. But it's so the interview is essentially about the ways in which far rights across Europe have been making common cause, and in the sense of standing up against the Muslim threat, or certain kind of fortress Europe type deal, this kind of stuff. You see the likes of Maloney and Orban, um, and Le Pen and all that. They have their own fights, but also they like to try and work together. And of course, across the pond, you have now a fairly far right administration on the way in the form of Trump. So yeah, I mean, what are general thoughts? So actually, I think it's worth a chat about kind of how the far right international is functioning in Europe at the moment, and what Trump's election is how that's going to impact it, sort of carrying on from the interview in the journal.
Yeah. So I think, so this move towards a kind of this far right international, as you say, like, we sort of saw sort of big moves to sort of really solidify that during the first Trump presidency with Steve Bannon, sort of trying to, he bought like a castle in Italy or something and tried to turn it into like a school.
It was an Orthodox church or something that they had like these big weekend blowouts and kept on bringing people from all over the place.
Yeah, and this was supposedly part of this a sort of attempt to sort of really kind of solidify, like, sort of train the next generation of, like, sort of international nationalists. And it's, once again, it's I don't know, sort of Steve Bannon. I'm a bit unclear exactly where he currently is in regards to his relationship to Trump and the presidency, but it seems likely that if it's not from him, we probably will sort of see, sort of this kind of global kind of confidence gaining from the far right. And under Trump, we that attempt by far right networks to sort of try and continue to establish themselves, that seems very likely to happen, and it presumably will, the American far right, which has a lot of money, sort of very tied to American capital. I do think it's kind of quite likely that we'll start to see that money once again moving back towards Europe. Like it seems sort of we do see that. We've got like what is it like, sort of Tufton Street or Square or whatever it is. I should know that. But like, this is already happening on a subtle level. We saw it increase during Trump and then sort of go back to being a bit more sort of subtle again after he was voted out. Once again, it just seems very likely to me that will increase again under him. And it's
also likely to get a big bolster from the AfD in Germany, of course, who seem on course for a big win. Most of Europe seems to now have very large and increasingly confident far-right presences. What's the situation in Spain at the moment in terms of far-right growth and presence?
Well, it has been very present the last decade. After the decision they had from the Conservatives to Vox, that is the far-right party, but we have seen much more present in the streets. And that means that people that are Franco supporters, that have always been there, they are gathering together with, of course, neo-Nazis and Vox people. And so in this case, when I'm thinking about the far right, I think there's a piece here that I'm really don't quite understand how it's going to play out, actually, but it's the piece that we don't know who is Trump going to choose to be in the presidency with him. But right now something points at perhaps Musk is going to be there, Elon Musk. And he's already creating bridges with Meloni in Italy. And we know how that can... Frontex is really, really bad in Europe. A lot of people don't even know. We always point at Trump or Biden and all that because they are so loud about building walls. We know that and deporting people. But actually in Europe, we are doing exactly the same because Italy made all these refugee camps in Albania. And we know what the UK was trying to do in Rwanda. So the European countries, for me, this mystery piece and how these oligarchs are going to be playing in the presidency and how are they going to be collaborating with politicians in the far right here or with groups, that is what it's not clear to me yet. Because, for instance, in Scandinavia, Elon Musk have been having a lot of trouble with unions. And people have been very, very skeptical to this laissez-faire that he has. And he is, well, of course, a free market lover. We all know that. So again, I guess that depending on the part of Europe and depending very much on the political situation we have, this can play out in very interesting ways. And even another piece that happened this weekend is with what happened in Amsterdam with the IDF supporters, the hooligans there. It's very interesting that they even get the chance to get into Europe, not that they can't, but the fact that they have been, again, being out in the streets while there's an ongoing genocide in Palestine. And we know they are also white supremacists, of course. All these pieces together and thinking that Europe is a little bit geographically in the middle, it might exacerbate this far-right international. And as Sam was pointing out, there's a lot of capital behind them usually. Not only in the US, here in Europe as well. We know that oligarchs and capitalists tend to support far-right groups. So that's I think we should be aware about. And now in the US, I know there's a lot of anxiety among people, and a lot of people are organizing again. There was a lot of mutual aid groups and solidarity groups before, But I think that in Europe, we shouldn't be waiting until this explodes in our faces like it happened now for a second time in the US. I mean, I think we really should be preparing to build up again a resistance, because it might not be pretty what it's coming.
To kind of end on a note of optimism, I suppose, with that, one thing that might well be a fracture point for far-right internationalism is that obviously within the far right you have factions which are more or less protectionist of their own, national economies and all the rest of it. And obviously Trump errs on that side. So one of the things that Trump has been saying fairly consistently is that he's intending to slap tariffs on not just China, but on basically every country to try and, there's been a big liberal thing about, oh, well, this is going to cause inflation. It's like, yeah, but the point of tariffs is to protect and rebuild industry within your own country. And it's like, Trump seems to have a better understanding of what the intention is of a tariff under those circumstances than a lot of liberals. But what it also does is it obviously provokes other countries to also start using tariffs, and you end up with a competitive element between erstwhile allies. And as we know, he's also quite big on no more handouts in defense terms, and he's quite, he makes really no bones about the fact that he doesn't really care about Europe, and has no real interest in doing Europe any favors. And within Europe, the tendency has been towards a sort of grumbling against the European ideal, whilst sort of understanding, oh, actually, if we leave Europe, we're kind of a bit screwed. And I think there's a good chance that Trump's approach is going to provoke the more kind of insular tendencies within the far rights of different countries. So whether or not that causes internal fighting and all the rest of it, we can only hope, I suppose. So what have we got left on the agenda? So we've got Johann G. being arrested in Germany and the Bristol Elbit lock-on. So I don't think we have it.
Sorry.
So
That's
I
my
don't think we
phone.
have anyone who's specifically read up on those two, but the very brief update on those, and for the full story, obviously, go to the Freedom website, is that Johann G. had been underground for 4 years, and was wanted as a left-wing extremist, and got caught in Germany by the Saxony State Criminal Police Office. So is now going to be needing solidarity, along with various other political prisoners in and around Germany at the moment. He was on a €10,000 reward for his capture, so he was doing quite well to stay out of prison in the first place.
Yeah, this is another kind of interesting sort of thing, because I think I don't know enough about this story to really sort of comment too much on it, but I think it does sort of show. I think this is also something that we need to be aware of, is that, like, sort of solidarity with sort of anti-fascists is going to presumably become more of a thing going forward, because for obvious reasons. So sort of at the very least, this story does draw attention to that kind of aspect. The state is going to become increasingly hostile to anti-fascists.
Yeah, I mean, we do have, obviously we've got institutions in various different countries. Like in the UK, we've got the I was going to say the Legal Defence and Monitoring Group has now been replaced by ACAB, the Activist Court Aid Brigade, along with GBC, the Green and Black Cross, I seem to
Green and
remember.
Black Cross, yeah.
Yeah, who do legal support. But there's also haven distribution for prisoners and sort of an ABC presence, but the problem is that we don't really have much linked up prison support going on at the moment. I think there's sort of good small organizations sort of making the effort, but not necessarily sort of federated. And we have a fair number now of prisoners who you may or may not agree that they are political prisoners, but certainly in that kind of ballpark, we've got Palestine action prisoners, we have just stop oil prisoners. Yeah, we've got there's a bundle of people knocking about who are under the cosh a bit, and we're relatively lightweight in terms of the rest of Europe. You know, there's large numbers of political prisoners all over in Germany and Spain and France. One of the things which, yeah, we're going to need to be able to do, especially if the far right take on, you know, we haven't really seen in Western Europe the far right in positions of power. Like obviously in France, um, they were just held off on a knife edge. Germany hasn't had them yet. We've got reform, but they mostly acted to split the Tories. So, but them taking power is going to be a completely different ball game in terms of arrests and how the court system deal with them in particular. People are going to go down for a much longer period of time, and we're going to need coherent solidarity systems and which talk to each other to help people out.
I think we were going to talk a bit about COP.
We were going to talk a little bit about COP. So in the basic background, Keir Starmer is making a bid to be the leader of COP29 in the absence of any US interest, which I find it mildly amusing / terrifyingly terrifyingly sad that Keir Starmer, Mr. Neoliberal, is posing as the savior of the environment. But apparently that's what we have now.
It's also one of those things where I saw that and I kind of yeah, my immediate reaction was what a load of nonsense. And I thought had that sort of moment where I stopped to think about it and I was like, oh God, maybe he is like the best person to do that just because there's no one else to do it. And that is a truly terrifying thought.
Yeah, I mean, obviously the big elephant in the room throughout this year's COP is that Trump's just gonna not bother. That seems to be the thing of
Yeah,
it.
he's made it very clear that he's going to. I think he said he's going to. You know, it's like one of the first things he's going to do is executive order the US out of was it the Paris Climate Treaty, which he did in his first term. So it'll be the second time he's done it. Which yeah, so everyone kind of is aware of that. I mean, yeah, it's not a particularly surprising move.
Yeah, and I mean this whole conference. I mean, obviously we've gone through so many iterations of it, and essentially the only policies that tend to come out of it have been ones which kind of fit into a greening of capital anyway. There's nothing. There's no discussion of degrowth. There's not even a discussion of the concept that permanent growth is not available on a finite planet. Like this isn't even on the agenda. And obviously this most recent one taking place in Azerbaijan, which
Yes.
not only has very little in the way of human rights, but is a significant up and comer on the oil selling scene, got caught out talking about exactly these kinds of things, and has said at the COP that as far as they were concerned, they weren't going to be shamed by the West into not selling as much oil as they managed to do. I was watching on actually Novara Media before coming on here. They had I can't remember her name. Senior Greenpeace rep, basically, who was sort of doing that thing of trying to be, responsible and serious minded about the whole thing and even handed and sort of saying, well, maybe it being held in Azerbaijan is going to lead to them having more scrutiny on them and they're going to do things a bit differently. And I'm just sitting there going, what planet are you on where you think that that a bunch of NGOs and diplomats sort of vaguely saying, oh, well, it would be nice to have a greener world, wouldn't it? It's going to change the mind of the Azerbaijani government.
I mean, yeah, that's a fairly I don't know. What do you expect at this point? I mean,
No, actually, I've been reading the news here where I'm here in Norway, and I've seen that there's a lot of criticism because they say it's the GOP meeting where it's going to be the largest amount until now of oil lobbyists, because they are expecting actually to make agreements there while the COP29 is happening. So I think, I mean, to be critical is wonderful, but at this point we can see that they are. Of course, I don't think radical people were taking these COP meetings seriously at any point. But right now it's so blatant and it's so obvious that they really don't care. And they can be signing treaty after treaty after treaty until their hands fall off, but still nothing happens. And if now it's, oil lobbies just, walking around in the halls trying to search for good opportunities there, well, I don't. I think that it's so open that now people really need to believe that the solutions for the climate crisis are not going to come from these meetings. That's for sure.
Yeah, I agree. I think I mean, just to sort of try to bring everything we've sort of talked about together a bit, I guess, like the one thing that can be relied upon to is sort of just people being visible and protesting, like sort of, I know there's various criticisms of like A to B marches, which in a lot of cases are sort of those criticisms are valid, but also sort of, and that's not an excuse to also kind of participate in more to kind of direct action and sort of stuff like that. But I think sort of, as you say, Sonia, sort of these meetings have just they're pure political charade and always kind of have been, but like now more so than ever, that is abundantly clear. So like, this is the moment where I think we do need to, sort of people need to be visible, they need to be out in the street, they need to be, sort of doing whatever they can to sort of force change, sort of the politicians and, sort of sort of do stuff that can't be ignored, because that's the only way, sort of, sort of change can happen is through the people taking action themselves. Like our so-called leaders are not interested in taking this seriously, so we have to.
I actually think these kinds of events they edge onto obviously sort of the big debate which has been taking place in the US in the wake of the Trump election has been between liberals and leftists, and sort of liberals saying, well, the problem is that we were too focused on woke and all the rest of it, and the left saying, no, it's the economy. The economy is the problem, but and sort of then the response being, oh well, Biden did all these nice things whilst he was in charge, and he strengthened the union position and all the rest of it, but was missing the point, the core point that all of Biden and Kamala as a kind of continuity Biden and all the rest of it is that they're continuing a trend of 30 to 40 years, which everybody is well aware of doing exactly this kind of thing, right? Where they hold these big blowout meetings where everyone's like, we're going to come up with a global solution to this, that, or the other. And then what people actually see in their everyday lives is minimal change, and what change is made is all geared towards helping large corporations to make more money, which growing GDP is not the same thing as improving the well-being of the general population. And this conceit that the likes of the Democratic Party leadership and Keir Starmer and all of the kind of centre-left centrist groupings have consistently failed to acknowledge is that if you keep promising jam tomorrow and jam never arrives, then eventually people stop listening to you. And even if you make nice little tweaks which improve things very slightly for one grouping of people, but are still mostly supporting people who are in the upper middle class upwards, this doesn't make the difference when you're asking people to take you seriously.
Yeah, and even if
Obviously,
in a global scale, Simon, we can also say that now we are talking about, you were mentioning the class perspective in it, but even in the difference between the global north and the global south, I mean, the situation is really, really precarious, especially for the global south. They are the ones being still neo-colonialized right now. And I think that that's something we also have to think about when they are in this COP29. I know that in earlier meetings, they have people from the islands in the Pacific, for instance, they have tried to explain how the climate changes are impacting them. And as you say, I mean, nothing is going to happen, and they know it. But still, this is something I think when we talk about solidarity, of course, class solidarity, we need to have that, but also at a global perspective. I mean, right now it's the earlier colonized places in the global south that are really suffering the consequences of these changes, I think. And as far as I know, they are not represented either in these meetings. I mean, why? I mean, what would they?
yeah.
They're just being exploited for minerals and all the other resources that we need to have our mobiles and our electric cars and so on in many places. But still, I mean, I think it would be nice also for European anarchists to remember that in a lot of countries in the global south, they are very much aware because they have been impacted. I mean, in Europe, we have been impacted the last, I don't know, 5 years, but they have been impacted much longer. So, yeah.
I think it's going to be interesting because, so obviously in global economic terms, Europe certainly, the US less, but certainly for Europe, we represent a declining share of the economy globally, and in terms of industrial production, all the rest of it. So our actual ability to pay for I mean, obviously, sort of Britain, you can sort of look at the way in which it's unable to pay for itself and its own basic needs in many ways because it's sold off all the, the other thing is we sold off the family silver. We privatized. I say we, that all of the state assets were privatized, and that will tend to, if Britain and Europe were ever inclined to pay towards the, I think it's between $1 and $5 trillion dollars a year that has been suggested as essentially climate reparations to the global south, you know, it seems highly unlikely that will be the case. The priorities will always be elsewhere, and even if promises are made, they're not going to be carried out. I think one of the interesting things in over the next decades is that the new powerhouses, the most famous of which is going to be China, also have their own imperial interests and are increasingly involved in the extractive process. Both via sort of places like Azerbaijan and Kazakhstan, but also increasingly in Africa as well. And the ways in which they will almost certainly, for as long as they can, pitch, well, we weren't the imperialists who did this to you in the first place, so why should we pay for it? Whilst also acting as the new empire, or increasingly building the new empire. And in terms of the conversations that I had, there's going to be this constant debilitating back and forth that goes on as to whose fault it really is, in which eventually no one will get paid. And the pressure towards that more globally cooperative, because it's the thing, like people talk about kind of neoliberalism as a kind of globalization, globalist economy, but it's not. It's an extractive economy in which one powerful set exploits another set across the globe. A truly globalized economy is one in which we are cooperative. We act in cooperative ways. We support each other. And that's a form of economy which we have to press for. Because states are not going to do it and corporations are not going to do it. It's got to be people. Cool. So that leaves us with, we are getting off time, so maybe we want to wrap it up. We did have one more, which was the Tony Blair Institute suggesting 3 million job losses from AI, but only hundreds of thousands permanently in the UK. So that's, that's jolly. Also, I tend to think wildly optimistic in as much as the reliance was on the UK education system to kind of upskill everybody towards taking on replacement jobs in AI. And if anyone's been around the UK education system in the last 20 years, yeah, I don't see it myself, particularly after Gove had his way with privatizing and academicizing everything.
Yeah, it's well, once again, sort of it's I don't know. I like to think of myself as a Star Trek anarchist. So, I'm fully in favor of the AI sort of doing all the jobs that can be done. And, I think that's a wonderful, wonderful thing. But, I also believe that means that should kind of, mean that if we're accepting that as an inevitable part of the future, we should be sort of also moving towards sort of this move towards kind of recreation and learning for the sake of recreation and learning, and sort of, we sort of being able to sort of turn up and just sort of have a random trumpet concert at your place of where you go to sort of do whatever work needs to be done and sort of stuff. It's very difficult to sort of it seems very, this move towards it seems very unsustainable and sort of poorly thought out, and I feel that like inevitably there's going to be resistance to that, and I don't think just from people, but I think like the governments themselves are going to sort of have to sort of still step in to sort of do something to prevent like sort of, well, riots. There'll be riots, won't there, if everyone's just out of work and sort of stuff. So
yeah, I mean, capitalism is not built on a workforce that doesn't work, essentially.
Exactly. I find the kind of the conversation around sort of AI to be very weird.
Yeah, mostly because we have to be aware that most of the companies creating and developing AI are private. Once again, I haven't heard of any of these programs being state-owned, thankfully, but it's corporations, which is not good either. And I kind of agree with Simon that if that might happen, that suddenly 3 million are out of job in the UK, the capitalist system will crumble. I mean, the whole idea is that people need to be in the workforce. The thing is, once again, that perhaps in future news reviews, perhaps we could go into see from anarchist perspectives what kind of future we could build, because that would be wonderful. I mean, think about being out of job. Sam was looking at the bright side of it. That would be lovely. We could do much more revolution daily, But I think that first we really need to be much more aware that who is owning this AI. I still haven't seen any collaborative projects around AI from autonomous groups or anarchist groups. And at the same time, again, what are we going to do if this actually happens? Because the problem is that nobody, if so much people would be out of the workforce, nobody is going to guarantee housing, food, health, care, nothing. I think that's the one pivotal point that we could discuss, actually, that how are we going to be organizing ourselves when actually people is out of work, and we know that, again, corporate states don't like that. And then what?
Right. On which chirpy note, I think we should probably call it a day, as we're coming up on an hour. thank you very much, both Sam and Sonia, for sitting in on the news review, and hopefully we shall see you again soon.
Thank you.
Sam. Thank you, Sonia.
Cheerio.
Thanks.